Next up, it's AIM-listed Challenger Energy, where the CEO, Eytan Uliel, AIM-listed oil and gas producer explorer, is joining us. Challenger are best known these days for their offshore Uruguay license, which they've been working on since 2020. They're proving up the potential for between 1 and 2 billion barrels of oil, and are currently running a farm-out process to find a suitor with deep pockets to help fund the work required. Long-term holders may know them for the Perseverance drill in the Bahamas, and along the way they acquired the Columbus assets in Trinidad and Suriname. CEG currently have a market cap of around £9 million, fairly low considering the potential of the Uruguay asset. Welcome, Eytan.
Hi, Donald. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, Eytan. Yes, so are you going to explain to us, give us the nuts and bolts of the company for us, please?
All right. Well, I'll take you through a few slides, but I'll try and leave as much time for questions because I think those tend to be what people want to hear more of. But for those who know nothing about Challenger Energy, we're AIM listed, Caribbean and Americas focused. We're an EMP junior. And really what I want to talk to you tonight about is the central plank of our business at the moment, which is our exploration asset in Uruguay, which is our exploration asset and which we believe offers a real prospect for very near-term value upside. I'll briefly mention Trinidad, which is our other operating business, but the company went through a comprehensive restructuring and recapitalization about a year ago today. So we have a few legacy assets which really are just there as things we're trying to monetize. There may be questions, I'm happy to take them. And we're in a pretty good place. We have no financial debt, low overheads, cash on the balance sheet. And, and we're getting after this Uruguay exploration possibility as fast as we can. So in terms of what it is we have in Uruguay, what people need to understand, everything is pretty much summarized on this page. We have the Area Off-1 license, which is an offshore license in Uruguay. It's very big, and we have a 100% working interest in that license. That license, for reasons I'll explain, we've accelerated our work program on it, and that work program has identified multiple independent plays. And as Donald mentioned in our introduction, we've now got to a point where we've been able to describe the prospect inventory as between 1 and 2 billion barrels of oil recoverable. That makes this a material, globally relevant prospect. And Uruguay is a great place to be. It's routinely ranked as, the best country in South America for doing business. And our license has very attractive fiscal terms. So all in all, we're very excited about the license. But a little bit of a lesson in geology, I guess, and why this has become so exciting in the last 12 months. In January of 2022, Shell and Total Energies separately drilled wildcat exploration wells in Namibia, and both made what are now routinely referred to as super discoveries, massive new oil discoveries. And what is the relevance of Namibia to Uruguay? The relevance is that when the Earth was one continent and the two plates pulled apart, the African and South American plate, the same source rock was deposited and that's now drifted apart and is present on both sides of the Atlantic. And what the wells in Namibia did is not only established that these source rocks can and do produce oil on the Namibian and South African side of the Atlantic, but can be correlated over onto our side of the Atlantic in Uruguay and northern Argentina. So basically de-risked everything and have established the potential for a new and very prolific petroleum system in Uruguay and the northern parts of Argentina. Now, when this all began, the first thing that people saw was a massive uptick in activity in Namibia. So discoveries were made, a large amount of activity has kicked off. People are drilling wells everywhere, seismic is happening, and then large transactions where big companies farm in or take an interest in acreage that small companies have to really accelerate. So that's the pattern that we saw and have seen happening in Namibia. And at the time that the discoveries in Namibia were made, I got onto my soapbox and I started shouting to everyone, this is a big deal. and nobody really paid too much attention. But little by little over the last 18 months, that confidence in Uruguay has been validated. So the first thing we saw is a big uptick in activity in Argentina. And there, for example, the first ultra deep water well is scheduled to spud any day now. There is seismic activity happening and more seismic activity planned for this year. But then the really interesting thing is what happened in Uruguay. So when we picked up our license in Uruguay in May of 2020, we were the only license holder in Uruguay. And because we were the only people who'd applied for a license, we were able to pick what we think is one of the best of the bunch. And we were able to get that license on a very minimal work commitment. We promised to do roughly $1 million of work over the course of 4 years. You then had the mega discoveries in Namibia in January 2022. Immediately after that, in May of 2022, you saw Shell, Apache come in and pick up acreage. And 6 months later, in the next bidding round, Shell, Apache, and YPF picked up more acreage. There was a who's who of international oil companies who all qualified as bidders but didn't succeed in getting acreage. And so literally in less than 12 months, we went from being the only junior player in Uruguay to now being the only junior completely surrounded by majors. There are no more licenses available bar one in Uruguay. And the majors, whereas we bid $1 million of work, these majors have collectively bid $230 million of work over the next few years. So really, it's not just us who think Uruguay is interesting. This is being validated by some of the biggest names in the oil industry. And it was in this context that in October, November last year, we said to ourselves, look, there's so much interest. We really need to accelerate our work program here. The work that we thought we'd do slowly over the course of 4 years, let's get on with it and do it in the next 6 months. And so we did that work, which essentially consisted of taking 2,000 kilometers of historic seismic data and having it reprocessed with modern technology, then submitting that data to what's called AVO attribute analysis, amplitude variation with offset, which is a technique now de rigueur in the international oil industry for assessing and evaluating ultra deep and deep water prospects. And then we complemented it with a geochemistry seabed sampling study and a satellite seep and slick study. And this is what I've been getting out and talking to people about. We literally finished this work about 3 weeks ago, announced the results, and the results have been much better than even we expected. So fundamentally, what happened is we did the seismic reprocessing, and what you see on that slide is you get a before and after image. The top bit is data from 1975, and when it's reprocessed, basically it's a better picture. You get to see what's under the ground much better. You get to see the faults, see the structures. The key thing is you can then submit that to AVO attribute analysis. It's a complicated area of geoscience, but the bottom line is what you want to do is identify structures that get graded with either a class 2 or class 3 AVO anomaly visible. And in our case, 2 structures in particular have stood out. One is a class 2, one is a class 3. This may not mean much to this audience, but trust me, in the world of oil and gas, when you're talking to the technical guys in big oil companies, this is gold. They look at this and they go, that is great. It's an essential component of being able to prove up or de-risk these offshore prospects. So we were very happy. Our AVO analysis is not quick and it's also not cheap. So we originally began with 6 lines. Because the results have been so good, we've put another 6 reprocessed seismic lines into the mix, and that work is ongoing at the moment. And the integration of all of that work, coupled with corroboration from the geochemical seabed study and the satellite study, essentially allowed us to map 3 primary prospects, to identify, map them, calibrate them, and come up with preliminary volume assessments. And this table essentially summarizes everything we now know about our license. We have 3 large prospects. They're each in the range of 500 square kilometers in reasonably manageable water depths. The reservoirs are not too deep. And the most important thing is the numbers are big. The preliminary estimate that we had shows, in the range of 1 to 2 billion barrels of oil in total. This is relevant to any large oil company. And as we've said a few times, we are now in the final throes of a formal volumetric assessment. I hope in the next couple of weeks to be able to communicate to our shareholders in the market the outcomes of that formal assessment, but it will be consistent with these numbers. We're pretty confident of that. And really, this is then what we have to show to other oil companies, much larger companies, and progress to the next stage, which is a farm out. So in terms of what the rest of 2023 looks like for Challenger Energy, it's pretty simple. We're the only junior in the area. We have a prime license. We are receiving lots of expressions of interest from potential partners. And we're going to finish our technical work, and we've kicked off a farm out transaction, a farm out process. So that is where we're going out, we're speaking to lots of oil companies, we're saying, hey, we want a partner who will come in, take an interest in the license, and pay for the future work program on that license. We are aiming to have that process completed within the next 6 months, so before the end of the year. And there is a very simple reason why we want it completed before the end of the year. The first is, obviously, it's a value catalyst for our company. But in terms of actually creating value in the asset, the next big technical step is what's called 3D seismic acquisition. Because Shell and Apache and APA have taken out the surrounding acreage, the logical thing is a multi-client seismic where we all get together and do it together. Some of the global seismic vendors have already begun the permitting process for that in Uruguay and are looking to be able to commence that in early 2024. So we need to bring in a partner before then, so we have the capital available to participate in that 3D seismic program. So it's a pretty straightforward story for us for the rest of the year as far as Uruguay is concerned. Finish our work, get a farm-in done. And really, this slide is the 5 things I'd like to leave you with to think about Uruguay. We have a massive prospect inventory of 3 sizable prospects, so we have play diversity, and that's been de-risked by the recent successes in Namibia. These prospects are seismically derived based on solid technical work that we've done, and now supported by the AVO analysis we did. And really, we're into a farm out process now, and we're very confident that we'll see a successful outcome there. Just very briefly in terms of Trinidad, because I know some people are interested. In Trinidad, we have a small production business. We produce around 325 to 500 barrels of oil a day. People will know we picked up this business a couple of years ago during the pandemic as part of a corporate acquisition. It's been hard work, but I think we've turned it around. We've cleaned it up a lot. We've got the costs under control. We've invested a bit in the fields and improving and stabilizing production. And this business is chugging along quite nicely. As at the moment, it's operating roughly break even, sometimes marginally profitable. We have some plans afoot to try and improve that and grow it. It's a sort of a slow burn, I guess, but the main point is it's a neat, tidy business now, massively improved on what it was 12 to 18 months ago, and we'll continue to work these assets as best we can. So that's the summary of Trinidad. Really, I guess people who attend these things want to know what's the news, what to watch out for in the next little while. Well, it's quite simple. As I said, Uruguay, update on our work program as we complete the final bits of it, and then how we're going on our farm out. So we've commenced that process, and as I said, we're looking to conclude it before the end of the year. Equally, and relevant to us, other people are doing work in the neighborhood. There's work in Argentina, there's work that'll commence in Uruguay. So how that work goes will also be relevant to us. In Trinidad, a bit of portfolio rationalization, a few asset sales, but really the goal there is just to continue to drive operating and financial performance through the balance of this year. And, we're always looking at new things, new ways to grow the business. And that remains something that we'll continue to do through the course of 2023. Finally, I guess, why follow the company? Well, the first is obvious. We offer investors exposure to a frontier exploration play, a high quality, globally relevant frontier exploration play, and the risk reward profile that offers, which is typically only available to an oil and gas major. If you want to have some exposure to what's happening in Uruguay and northern Argentina, we're pretty much the only way you can. The other thing is the asset, as I mentioned, is prime. It's a high quality asset in a global exploration hotspot. And you would expect the CEO to say this, but we believe we're very undervalued at the moment. There are a couple of broker reports out on the company, which do valuations, many multiples of what we are at the moment. You can look at comparable transactions that have been done. You can look at other companies for whatever reason, we're very undervalued. We see that there are some very clear, simple to understand near-term value catalysts in the next 6 months. And we hope and expect that will see value uplift achieved as we deliver on those catalysts. So that's the story of Challenger Energy in a nutshell. I'm happy to take all the questions in the world.
Eytan, thank you so much for that. That was really good. And you freshened that up from the last time we ran through it. So well done you. I thought some of those slides were fantastic. I love the aerial shots of the licenses. That really put your Uruguay license in context. So some great slides there. Thank you. If the focus is offshore Uruguay, how would you sum up what you've achieved so far? It seems from probably quite an unpromising asset. Uruguay has surpassed your expectations. Would that be fair?
Yeah, look, when we picked it up in May of 2020, we saw it as an option play. We were able to get in there during the pandemic when nobody was paying any attention. We knew it was a good license. Nobody knew what was going to happen in Namibia at that stage, but we knew it was a good license. We knew about the Lentea prospect, which is now one of 3, but we knew about that. We thought, okay, we can pick this up, we can sit on it for 4 years and see what happens. So it was an option play, and it's an option play that's panned out in the end, because not what anyone knew at the time, but Namibia has been a huge success, and equally, activity has ramped up. So that part has happened, and I can't claim credit for that too much. What I can say we've achieved is we did really solid work on an accelerated timeline, and we have added real value. It may not be obvious to shareholders and the investor community, but in the oil industry, people look at the work we've done. They go, oh, great, you've reprocessed the seismic, you've got AVO support on 2 of the main prospects, you've got all these other bits of work you've done. We've done really good quality work. We've used the best consultants in the industry because we knew that they would have to sit in a room one day with an oil major and explain to them their own work and why we're confident and so on. So I'm very, very proud of the work we've done. And as I say, we're finishing that off as we speak. And I hope that the results as we get to the point where we can really lay them out clearly will be a testament to that. So yeah, good solid work.
And how much interest have you had in your good solid work? You've got a data room which is improving month by month. What sort of interest has there been?
A lot. I don't want to give you numbers, but we have, a great number of very sizable oil companies, and then what you might call mid-sized independents, who've all signed up to participate in our farm out process. I can't tell you, when people say the word exploration hotspot, it's not an exaggeration. I've been doing in this business for a while, and sometimes you're pushing the proverbial uphill. This is the complete opposite. We have unsolicited people calling us up saying, I saw your presentation, we saw you've got this license, we saw you're doing a farm out process, how do we get involved? So we've got, the process now formally underway. It's a usual process. People come and get a management presentation, they fiddle around in a data room, they want to spend a couple of days looking at all the seismic. It takes time, but the initial response has been really, really good.
Now you've got Shell, you've got Apache, you've got YPF on your doorstep. Am I right in thinking that you can rule those three out because they've got plenty enough on their hands? It's everybody else, the people who missed out.
No, you don't have to rule them out at all. I mean, you could. It's the people who missed out, and the people who've never even thought of Uruguay before. There are some of those. If you go back in the presentation and you look, a couple of the prospects we've identified, the two big ones, actually a small portion of them overlap onto the Shell and Apache block. Geological structures don't respect man-made borders, and that's just how it's turned out. Now, the good news for us is that the majority is on our block, and what's called the up-dip termination is on our block. So, oil being lighter than water will sort of rise to the higher parts of the structures which are on our block. So the logical way to test those structures is to start with drilling on our block. What that means is, in the case of those neighbours, there is a construct where you would unitize the blocks, you join forces, so that happens all the time in the oil industry. So no, I wouldn't.
Do you want to explain a wee bit more about unitizing?
Well, you basically say we merge block 1 and block 4 together, and we had 100% of that and they have 100% of that, and now we have 50-50 of the two, or whatever the commercial deal. And
in which case, which of the majors would you be working with?
Well, our neighbours are Shell and Apache. So, so they would be, I'm answering your question, do we rule them out? The answer is definitely not. You don't rule them out. The construct of a transaction with them would be somewhat different because they're the neighbours, but they're not precluded from dealing with us. And indeed, there's a compelling reason why they may want to try and come up with a deal.
Crikey, I didn't really expect to get such a good answer. That's a very good answer. That was what's known in the trade as an exploratory question.
Well, there you go.
We got a bullseye there. Fantastic. You've come up with a number of 1.1 to 2 billion barrels of oil.
Yep.
Forgive the pun. Can we drill down on that 1 to 2 billion barrels of oil? Give us more detail on how you came up with such a very, very large number.
Well, it's the outcome of the technical work I mentioned. So you've got seismic, 2D seismic, historic 2D seismic, where it gets reprocessed. That allows you to essentially see much better what's underground. You do the AVO analysis. You give it to a bunch of serious PhD boffins who know their stuff. They sit in a room, they crunch numbers, they do analysis of how thick the structures are, how big they are, the known. They look at every piece of data they can find, historic wells, etc. Put it all together. You get porosity figures. They look at analogs, and they collectively come up with an assessment of how much the tank can possibly hold. And then they whittle that down to say, well, and what percentage of that tank could potentially one day be recoverable? And that's the number. Now, as I said, the first phase of that work, you get these sort of these approximate numbers, and that's where we've said between 1 and 2 billion barrels. Okay, the next phase of work is that gets refined into a formal volumetric assessment. It's, people who follow the industry, there's a P10 and a P50 and a P90 and a mean and all of that, but there's a huge body of work that goes into that. And we will be, as I say, completing that hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And then that kind of it'll be a little bit more granular than just between 1 and 2 billion barrels. But, we're pretty confident that it'll be consistent.
And you hope that the next steps, you're very hopeful that the next steps will be 3D seismic,
yes,
done on a joint basis. But unfortunately, 3D seismic's not cheap. But put that to one side. What difference does 3D seismic make in terms of that continuing proving of the reserve?
In simple terms, it's just a better picture. I mean, basically, the ultimate goal is to drill a well, drill an exploration well, and nobody. I mean, these exploration wells in 800 meters of water, and they are $40 to $50 million pieces of work per well. There is nobody in the world who will drill a deep water well of this nature based on 2D seismic. It's just not precise enough. The image, you kind of know what's there, but you really want to have a much greater granularity, and that's what you get from 3D seismic. So to answer your question, what benefit is it? It will give a much better image, and it is the thing that every major oil company will want in order to plan the thing that comes after, which is an initial well.
Okay, excellent answer. Okay, question in from John Shevlin. He asks, it takes you a slightly different direction, but it is a thought that occurred to me. You mentioned that one of the licenses hasn't been picked up. Are there reasons for that particular area not being selected, and might CEG be looking at it?
I cannot speculate as to why it hasn't been picked up. All I can say, there are rules in Uruguay as to how much each license holder is allowed to have. It's a bit more complicated, but the short answer is that I think possibly Shell and Apache were pretty close to their limits, and so when they made their last bids, they probably high graded the ones they wanted. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with Area 3. It's a different geological setting. The play potential there is more akin to Block 2, which is the one that Shell has. It's kind of different to Block 1. I mean, obviously, when we took out Block 3, we thought that was the best of the bunch. But we did look at all of them, and we did look at when we took out off 1, we thought that was the best of the bunch, but we looked at off 3, and we shall see. We shall see.
Okay. Okay. My thought on this is that you've got lots of the other majors there. They've all got their own work streams taking place. You're a junior. Juniors tend to be more nimble and work very quickly because you have different needs. What are the other majors actually doing on their blocks, and to what extent can you learn from their work streams?
Well, we'll learn a lot. What we know, because it's public, is what they've committed to do. Like us, they have got 4 years in which to do it. So in theory, they could take their time. I'm pretty sure, though, what you will see, because you're seeing exactly the same thing in Namibia, is that everyone's rushing to accelerate their work. And the hope very much is that we'll see activity kicked off in the neighbouring blocks, and that will be very useful to us, as our activity will be useful to the neighbours. Everyone knows what's going on.
So as time passes, does the prospect get better and stronger because the majors are actually going to start releasing more data, more information about what they've succeeded in achieving?
Yes, it does. I mean, stipulate
it does anyway. Yes.
Stipulate that the work they're doing is successful and finds good things and so on. But I don't want to be. We're a small company, and this is essentially our core value driver. I don't want to sit on my hands for the next 4 years and just wait until Shell and Apache and these other guys do a bunch of work. I mean, I want to get after it. Our shareholders, I think, will benefit if we can actually drive it forward a lot quicker. And
Eytan, I wasn't at all suggesting you're doing nothing. I was suggesting that in parallel process, your position actually does get stronger.
It does, and look, it's an interesting thing because I've been asked this question a few times before. What happens if you don't get a farm out done? Well, we will get a farm out done, but if we don't, for whatever reason, we have 4 years left, and we've fulfilled all of our work program commitments already. So the default position is what you're saying: sit there, wait for the neighbours to finish their work, let them prove up the value and come back to it. But that's a long, tedious process, and I'd much rather be doing stuff right now, driving it forward, and seeing some real value being created in the next 6 months.
Okay, let's take a swerve to a geographical swerve to Trinidad, if we may. We've got a retail investor question. Chris Afford asks, the deal announcement with Predator for Cory Moruga. I think we saw Cory Moruga on slide 17, I think it was.
Yes.
It mentioned the potential for collaborating on other fields. So Predator have got a CO2 technology, they pop it into the ground. You can tell us more about that, I'm sure. Has any progress been made with that, and do you see scope for increasing production at Innis Trinity and Goodron? We also saw those, so good question, Chris Afford. Well done.
The short answer is we do see scope for increasing production. It's not easy, I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea. Trinidad is old oil fields, mature oil fields. You need to put a lot of effort. It's a real grinding process, but we do see scope for production, both conventional production increase, maybe some new wells, some new infill wells, really, if you like, sweating the asset. And then, Trinidad as a nation has established a priority. They'd like to see EOR, enhanced oil recovery techniques, applied, one of which being CO2 injection, which Predator has some expertise in. So yeah, we are talking to them. Their processes, things that they're good at, are applicable not just at one field, but at several. Each one has slightly different, parameters, etc. But no, we as people will know, we had a little spat with Predator a while back, but we've all kissed and made up. We're now friends again, and we're working very collaboratively and well together. And, the ultimate aim of everybody is to see production growth, because, that's money.
Okay, staying in Trinidad, you're selling a couple of assets in Trinidad. How are the sale of those coming along?
Progressing. I don't want to put a timeline or anything. These are small assets.
It's Trinidad. Things will progress slowly, I suspect.
Things progress slowly. They're small assets. They're not going to move the needle in terms of real value creation for the company. They do provide the opportunity to rake in a bit of cash and push work commitments off onto other people, and
it tidies up the portfolio.
It tidies up the portfolio. So we are working on it, and there are a few things in the works there, but they will be when they will be.
Okay. The big question, you answered it at the top, and I'll get you to answer it again. The question every investor asks, and there are some mean-spirited people out there, and some nice people, but it is a fair question. How do you get the share price to represent fair value for the assets? So there you go.
Well, I get it. I mean, it's a very frustrating, it's super frustrating. Almost no matter what we do at the moment, the share price is doggedly fixed where it is. And I am a large shareholder in the company. I've written big checks. I own 7% of the company. You've got a big chunk in this company. You're very aligned. Yes, and I've put a lot of my friends and people I've known from the past, and I've put a lot into this. So I, more than anybody, would love to see the share price rise. And I can't control the market. So I think I've said it before. I may have even said it to you. In the end, you have to believe that if you deliver the goods, sooner or later, the market will see the real value. And it may take them a while. It may be next week. It may be in 3 months. It may be in 6 months. But we've delivered the goods. We said, we're going to get this license. We're going to do good technical work. We're going to prove up the prospects. And now we're moving along. And the next big thing is, we said, we're doing a farm out. And I've said to everyone, I've pinned my flag to this mast and said, by the end of the year, we'll have the farm out done. If that doesn't put a bit of life into the share, I don't know anymore. But that's what we're going to deliver. And as I say, you have to believe that sooner or later, as you deliver the goods, you'll see the share price start to reflect what we believe is the real value here. I mean, as I said earlier, look at the analyst reports, and you'll see what other companies that have similar things are valued at compared to us. Okay, very quickly, Eytan, last question. What does the news flow hold over the next few months? Oh, it's like I said on my last slide. finishing our technical work. You'll see some news about that soon. Progress of the farm out through the rest of the year. Rationalisation and improvement of the Trinidad business, and whatever business development opportunities come our way. But it's
Great.
really focus on the farm out. That's what I would say.
Great. Well done, Eytan. I thought that was great. I thoroughly enjoyed your slides, which had been a bit refreshed. That was great. Thank you so much for joining us.